Hey. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Dr. Rachel Jabaily, and I'm Associate Professor at Colorado College in the Department of Organismal Biology and Ecology. And today I'm very excited to be joined by my five favorite alumni who are all currently in graduate school at various places. And this is a panel to talk about their experiences about deciding to apply to grad school, actually applying, interviewing, and deciding, and then what is life like actually in graduate school. These are common questions that myself and other professors get, but we think it would be really beneficial for you all, current OBE or incoming OBE students, to hear from our alumni about their experiences. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, and we'll go in graduation order. Let's start with Leah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Leah Veldhuisen. I graduated from CC in 2019. I was an OBE major. I ran track and cross country while I was there, and I also did a semester abroad. And I am currently I guess, rising fifth year PhD candidate at the University of Arizona in their ecology and evolutionary biology department, which is basically the same as OBE. And I did a bunch of field work for that at the Rocky Mountain Biological Lab, which is outside of Crested Butte. And I'm studying phylogenetic patterns in plant communities.
Awesome. Emma.
Hi, everyone. My name's Emma Fetterly. I graduated from CC in 2020. And while I was at CC, I was an OBE major. I was also really involved in kind of the sustainability office at CC, specifically the Student Org Enact. So I did a lot of environmental justice related organizing while on campus. And currently, I'm a second year master's student at the Chicago Botanic Garden and Northwestern. They have a joint program there. And I study flower color variation in Castanea coccinea, which is a Midwestern endemic.
Caroline.
Hi, everyone. My name is Caroline Brose. I use she, her pronouns. I graduated from CC in 2022. I am just about to start my third year of my PhD at the University of Wyoming, where I am part of the botany department, but it's also an interdepartmental program in ecology and evolution. So I get to hang out and meet a whole bunch of other people that ask the same kind of questions, but with mule deer or birds or insects. I study speciation and phylogenetics of Arctic and alpine willows, and also a little bit of Castanea as well, because that's what my advisor works on. When I was at CC, I played club hockey. I don't really know I don't think I did anything else. I just played hockey and that was it. Yeah.
Awesome. Eliza.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eliza Hayse. I also graduated from CC in 2022. My pronouns are she, her, and I recently graduated with my Master of Science from Lund University in Sweden. And I'm probably starting a PhD in the fall. Cross my fingers, we'll see. Or basically now. I'm currently working as a research assistant for my old advisor. At CC, I also did molecular biology and took a lot of creative writing courses. And I was also an RA and pretty involved with the Colorado Springs Food to Power as a student worker. And that's about all I did.
And Josh.
What's up, everybody? I'm Josh Felton, class of 2022. I use he, they pronouns and was an OBE major. And in my free time at CC, I was a intern for the chaplain's office. So I was one of the Spiral Fellows. I also played on the men's and mixed Frisbee teams, which was a blast. And I guess I'm a rising second year at Cornell University in the plant biology section. And my project is TBD, but it's going to involve something with bromeliads and breeding system evolution in the group, looking at different expressions of breeding systems in the genus Catopsis.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody so much for being here. So we have kind of three phases of this conversation. So we're going to put you back in to undergrad as you were starting to think about applying. So what did you do or experience as an undergrad that made you want to apply to graduate school?
I can go. Also, a big caveat here, I think I'm maybe the only person in this group who didn't have any of undergrad during COVID. So my experience was probably pretty different than a lot of people. I really loved my research blocks, and I really enjoyed having like free time and flexibility and like being able to build my own schedule and like follow rabbit holes of like, I really liked this paper, who are the authors, like let's go see what else they've done. And kind of being able to completely do that as I wanted to and like not have to like do certain assignments or like just had the complete freedom to do that. And I really enjoyed it. And I'm also pretty good at structuring my own time, which is a very key skill in grad school. And I knew that from you. And I was like, oh, I'm good at this. I enjoy having this flexibility to do this stuff. And then I was like, I think that's what grad school will be. It's just a bunch of kind of unstructured time of doing research. So yeah, I would say those research blocks without having a lot of direction and having to make that for myself was very key. And I enjoyed that a lot.
I can go. I had kind of a roundabout experience of choosing grad school. I wanted to do like 17 million different things when I first started at CC. And I remember talking to Jabaily. I was an OBE major, but I was like, should I be a molecular biology major? Should I go like on the pre-PT track? I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then the summer before my senior year, I had taken a few really big courses my junior year, like evolution with Jabaily, and I found bryophytes to be incredibly interesting. So I had a pretty broad background, but I decided I wanted to dive more into something specific. I didn't feel ready to commit to a PhD, so I started looking into master programs. But I had a lot of conversations with Jabaily, and a lot of conversations with other people who'd applied to grad school because I was like, what is this about? And I also didn't really think I was ready for grad school yet, but I just kind of made the leap, and I think that was a good choice. So.
It's all you, Caroline.
Oh, geez. Okay. Wow. All right. I feel like I'm a little bit different in that I have always known what I wanted to do. Part of that is because my family moved to Alaska when I was 9, and I went to this really special elementary middle school that spent a lot of time outside. And so I've known since I was 10-ish that I wanted to work with plants and be outside. And I've kind of just spent the rest of my academic career in high school and in college at CC, just trying to find a little niche spot for where I was the most interested. That started with I reached out to an old family friend and got involved with the research project back in Alaska the summer after my freshman year of college and got to go present my research there as part of a research block at CC, which was really exciting. And then Jabaily put out a call for people to work on phylogenetics of the Goodeniaceae family, which is a family of Australian wildflowers during my sophomore year. And so I joined her lab then and got super excited about phylogenetics and had worked on my senior thesis on this family of Australian plants and was so excited about all of these evolutionary questions that we could ask. But my heart has always pulled me back to Alaska. And so this summer after my junior year of college, another CC professor in the OBE department, Dr. Corsan, asked me if I wanted to be a research assistant for her fieldwork at Toolik Field Station in Arctic, Alaska. And that was what brought me back to Alaska, made me re-fall in love with Arctic plants. And so I always knew that I wanted to go to grad school, but it was after that summer with the methodology and the kind of questions that I've been working on with my senior thesis with Jabaily, with the study system with Dr. Corsan, that I really found a gap in the knowledge in Arctic willows that I was super excited about. And so that brought me back to CC to start looking at applying to grad schools my senior year.
I guess I'll quickly just add on a couple of my thoughts. So like for me, I kind of knew I wanted to be an educator for a while. Like my mom, she's a teacher. My dad was an adjunct professor. And then, so like new education was like some career goal or pathway that I could take. And then when I was in undergrad, Jabaily's mentoring as well as having great teachers like Shane really made me realize that like higher education could be a prime spot for me to, in terms of like education, like K through 12, higher ed, or other forms. Like I thought that higher ed would be the spot for me because I also took this class during the pandemic, block 8, on the purpose of higher ed. And we talked a lot about, the differences in higher ed versus K through 12. And it came up about academic freedom and how you're really, once you're tenured, allowed to study and learn about whatever you want. That's pretty much what academic freedom is. And the way I pick up hobbies and drop hobbies, I realized that maybe this academic freedom and being able to just research and do whatever I want and having that freedom would be kind of a good, sustainable career for me. And I also enjoy doing research and that flexibility, similar to what Leah said, of being able to structure my own time and figure out what needs to be done and developing a timeline to get it all done.
Yeah, I can just quickly add my piece. I definitely want to reiterate a lot of the things about just like really loving doing research with Jabaily and enjoying my research blocks and summers of research when I was at CC, and that kind of pushed me to doing more of a research-based graduate program. But I originally entered into CC thinking I would be more interested in studying animals and go to veterinary school afterwards. And then after my first ecology and botany class with Jabaily, I was totally swayed to the plant side and continued on to do research when I was undergrad. And then for 3 years after graduating, I was a research assistant at various projects or with various projects. And then am now in a graduate program that's very plant focused. And so, yeah, it was kind of a winding path, but I always knew that I wanted to study the natural world in some capacity and to be outside because I really enjoy camping and being outside.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so when we think about graduate school, is the way I kind of explain it to those who are considering applying. I see it as like a fun new part-time job you're going to have for the better part of a year. So I'm going to talk through what I think is kind of the cycle, and then you guys can modify that, and especially related to European. So graduate applications, right, in the US are usually due like in the winter, right? And so that might be December, January-esque, somewhere in there. If you're interested in applying directly for a PhD and you are a US citizen, it will probably be a very good idea for you to apply for a graduate research fellowship. Yes. And those are due around October 15th. In EEB type graduate programs, you generally don't want to be an anonymous name in a pile of completed applications. So you need to do a lot of work ahead of time to get to know potential advisors. So you might start some of that initial reach out in, say, August, might be a reasonable, like the start of the semester or just a bit for. So you're thinking like August is a time to start doing some work, a big writing deadline in October, big writing deadlines for deciding on programs in the winter. You then might get invited to interview, or if you're admitted, to tour somewhere in February, March. And then usually you'll find you have to make a final decision by about April 15th, which is around the 1st of April is when those GRF announcements come out, which impacts some people's choices. So does that mesh with all of your experiences, more or less? Now, Eliza, yeah, you are the lone person here who has applied to multiple graduate schools in Europe. What would you say to kind of modify this?
Yeah, so I only applied to one master's program in the US, and I applied to like, well, eight in Europe. Um, I started doing research in August, um, of the year before, or no, in the summer. But then I basically had a list of like quite a few schools in August. And after that, I reached out to professors at those schools and I emailed them. I didn't get a few replies, but for those that I did receive replies from, I scheduled a Zoom call and I talked to a few professors that way, a few researchers. I talked about my interests because there's not that many bryologists in the world. And I actually was referred to other schools sometimes. So I looked into those schools as well. Um, the application process in Europe is a bit different. So if you're an American citizen, you have to you normally don't have to prove that you speak English, but you do have to submit a lot of materials like proving your citizenship and stuff. And you find out anywhere from December to February. And in the case of Sweden, you don't find out until like the end of March, but then you make your decision by April 15th. And then for Swedish schools, you actually rate them depending on how much you want to go to the school. So I applied to two schools in Sweden, but I ranked Lund University above Uppsala. So when I got into Lund, which the program was more competitive, my applications to the other universities were deleted. So it works a little bit different in that way. And then you submit your decision mid-April. Yeah, that's about it. And then you arrive in August. So you have to like figure out like residence permits and flights and stuff. So that's another layer of stress that, yeah, we can talk more about that, I guess.
So when do you think an undergrad should start thinking about applying? And I know we have varying experience here with various gap years. So if you could talk about when did you think about applying? And if you had a gap year or multiple years, what did you do? How did that kind of help you? And if you didn't, do you have any regrets about that?
I guess I'll just continue quickly. I didn't take a gap year. I decided to apply to grad school relatively late, which went into my decision of choosing a master's instead of a PhD. I don't regret not doing a gap year, but I think I would have if I wanted to do a PhD. But a master's felt more like time for me to figure out my niche, my specialty, figure out what I really was passionate about, and learn more research skills because I didn't have that much opportunity for research in my bachelor's. The internships I got were canceled with COVID. And then I just had some other stuff going on. So I think that was really great for me. So I didn't feel like I needed a gap year. I think a master's was good. Jumping right into it was good. But if I'd done a PhD, I might have considered it.
I can
I
speak
did
from the
take a year
perspective.
off.
Oh yeah.
Oh, go for it.
Same.
Go for it, Emma.
Okay. Yeah. So I also took, I think, 2 years off in between graduation and starting my program. It's kind of fuzzy with COVID, but I think it was really great for me personally because I was able to work in a couple different like environments that I didn't get exposure to when I was at CC. So the first position I held was working with the Forest Service in southern New Mexico, and that was part of an internship program through the Chicago Botanic Garden, where they place kind of young professionals in the environmental sphere with like government agencies to do work. And so we were working on rare plant monitoring in a national forest down there, and that was so cool just to get more of like the practical side of some of the work that we do and more of this applied space that I didn't really have exposure to doing research at CC. And working directly with like federal officials was really cool. It was also COVID, so it was a bit of an interesting time to be working and kind of networking in that space because all of it was via Zoom. And then the second position that I held was working as a research assistant with a lab from a big kind of R1 university setting, and that was at the Rocky Mountain Biological Laboratory. and working for a PI with graduate students and a ton of postdocs and just like a really big team and a bunch of undergraduate interns. And that was a really cool experience just to understand how these bigger lab groups operated and how these spaces kind of operate outside of like a very small liberal arts environment that I was used to. And I think that was really important to understand those spaces and dynamics before applying to grad school and being a graduate student myself. And so for me, I think it was a great decision, but I've seen both sides. So it's definitely up to you and your preferences and what you need to see before you enter grad school.
I'm gonna echo Emma. I think so I took 1 year off and I honestly wish I had taken more. And I wanted to take more, and COVID hit like literally a week after I did all my interviews, and everything was super. I mean, everyone remembers that time. Like nobody knew what was going on. People were getting fired left and right. And I had gone through all my interviews and I was like, I actually think I'm not ready for this. I don't know exactly what I want to do. I think I want to apply to different kinds of programs. I think it'd be better for me to be in like a natural resources, like go a little more applied route. And I was like, it's COVID. It's like March 20th, 2020. I don't know what to do. I can't get another job. I had a seasonal job in Aspen that was ending. And I was like, I have no choices. Like all I could do is go home and live with my parents and do nothing. So I ended up going into grad school, but I really wish I had taken more time. And I think my interests have pivoted. I mean, I still really like my project. I think it's really cool and interesting, but I wish I was in a program that like more emphasized restoration and conservation and application and interactions with stakeholders in various ways, because my department really does not do that. And it's honestly a little bit frowned upon in our program to like even like talk about talking to a landowner, which is not the right program for me. And I wish I'd taken more time. And I just think there's literally no downside to not taking time. Like, I think at the very worst, it's like neutral and you're like, yep, cool. I still really like what I liked before. And that's great. But I don't know. I just don't think it'll ever set you back. And I think the more you know about different jobs, and then you can be like, well, I saw this person, I liked their job, they have this degree. Maybe I can like go that path. And I don't know. I just think the more you know about what's out there, the better. And like, you're not going to get that just being in college. Like you really can only get that experience, like actually going out and looking for jobs and having jobs and like talking to people.
So I think I have a little bit of a different perspective on that. I did not take time off. I graduated from CC and left the next morning for this field station in Alaska. And I went straight from the field station to the Botanical Society of America conference with Jabaily and Josh. And then I had 2 weeks at home with my family before I moved to Wyoming and started grad school. I don't think regrets is the right word because I don't have regrets. But I am tired. I am in my body exhausted because I've been going to school since I was 6, maybe like even earlier, right? Like I have had no time off. But on the flip side of that, I felt like I was ready. I felt like I had no idea what I would do if I was going to take a year. I have spent so much time in my life, like in the field doing random projects. It's funny. I feel like I have never really had a job before because I've just barely gotten paid for anything that I've done. But I have done so much volunteer field work and research projects with people. My sister-in-law is a wildlife biologist, and she's been dragging me out into the field to work on projects with her since I was 12. So I have seen so much different sort of science and knew exactly what I wanted to do. I had my own project in mind that I wanted to work on and felt really passionate about. I knew there was a big gap in the knowledge, so there was a really easy spot for me to fit in there. And I felt like if I was going to take time off, I would have just been twiddling my thumbs for a year waiting to get to grad school. And I've always known that I wanted to go to grad school because I just really love learning. I love school. It's like the joke that I always have is the only thing I've ever been good at is school. So I just keep going until someone tells me I can't anymore. And so yeah, I mean, it's a different experience for everyone. I definitely feel like it was the right decision for me, but I am tired. And if you don't have exactly what you want to work on, especially for a PhD in mind going into it, I I don't recommend. But yeah, it was the right decision for me.
Can I also add something quickly? Um, for me, choosing to go to grad school was also a way to move abroad. Um, like those two things were very linked for me. I wanted to experience life abroad. I wanted to try. A 2-year program seemed great to, if I hate it, it's only 2 years. Um, if I love it, like I do, I can stay. Well, depending on immigration. But like it just opened up a new opportunity for me. So, and it was a lot more like relaxed, I guess. I can talk more about like the differences in the school systems. But yeah, I think that that was another big thing that influenced my decision to apply right away. Is I also like Caroline, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. Like, was I supposed to like I've had a lot of jobs. I was work studying my entire 4 years, at least 20 hours a week. So I was like, I don't want to work anymore. I just want to be a student. Which I didn't get to be at CC. So that was a different part of my decision. I used it as a kind of a way, which you can think about that the way you want to.
I would also just like to stick in there an argument for this is like very dependent on your family's financial situation. So like think about that. But like taking a year to work, also going into grad school with a savings account is hugely stress relieving. Hugely stress relieving. And I have friends who've taken a lot more time off than me and had jobs that paid a lot better than mine, and their lives are very different than mine. So even if you don't love your job, I think having a savings account to go into it, because you're not going to save in grad school, to have a little cushion, cover your car repairs, whatever your flights, expensive things, like $1,000 unplanned in grad school is huge. So like having a little bit of money to be like, okay, I'm okay, it's gonna be okay, is I think a really was for me has been a really significant thing. And seeing people around me who either have or don't have that, everyone's lives are I think pretty different based on that too.
Great thoughts, everybody. Can we move to talking about looking for grad programs and advisors? So if you could talk about what were some of the things you valued when you were looking for both of those things, the program and the advisor. How did you even go about finding these peoples and programs, and how did you narrow down a list?
Yeah. So when I was looking for a program, I knew that like I wanted to keep working on bromeliads. And so like one of my main goals was like having some research freedom with the lab I would join, that I wouldn't like be joining in on a project that I could have some say in the development of it. Um, so that was really key. And then after having Jabaily as an advisor, I knew that I kind of wanted a hands-off advisor, like not one who would be micromanaging me, you know, be there for support, but not, I could bring a question to them and they wouldn't be constantly berating me with what did I do, micromanaging me and all that. And the way I started looking for programs actually started like a couple years before I even thought about applying to grad school. And this was from the Eco Log, which is just like a listserv email that sends out positions like technician positions, summer gigs, as well as postdoc, I think, and grad school positions, which is just a really good way to kind of scope the scene out of what positions are being offered, what like when are the deadlines for these different types of positions, stipends, what that might look like, and funding and all that. And then the biggest leaps I made was during a conference that I went to, and I kind of just asked students, PIs, anybody who I was able to chat with, because this was like the year before I was thinking about applying to grad school. I told them, what I was interested in terms of research, if they knew of any PIs that might fit that description. And that really helped, as well as asking Jabaily, my advisor, for some advice of if she knew any PIs of who would also fit into what I was looking for. And it actually came full circle this year too at botany, when a couple of undergrad students asked me about grad school, and I was able to give some ideas. So by all means, don't feel shy to ask folks about if they have PIs in mind, because if people who have been in the game longer know who's looking for students, if they're good advisors as well, and will be able to help you.
Yeah, I have a lot of the similar thoughts as Josh. Also, I knew that I wanted to work on Arctic plants, so a big thing for me was finding an advisor who was willing to just like let me take that and run with it. Um, so one of the first questions I asked when you're doing interviews and things, talking to advisors, and they ask you what your research interests are, I very clearly expressed that that was what I wanted to work on. And I always asked them if that was something that they would support and be willing to accommodate for me. Because that's not something that I was willing to compromise on in graduate school. Finding programs and advisors, I think I had a bit of a special, very privileged experience in which I am studying the same sort of thing as Jabaily did. And so we had coffee one morning and she sat me down and we went across the country, and she from east to west, and she named everyone that she knew that was studying the same sort of things that we do, and gave suggestions about who were good advisors and good schools and programs to look into. So I had a huge head start on that. And then I took that list and narrowed it down, looking at these professors' websites, their publications. Just read, even if you don't read the papers, just reading the titles is a big way to figure out what is going on in their lab. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on things to talk to current and previous grad students about too. So yeah, but that's how I figured out where to go. I would say that picking a select group of advisors to reach out to and reaching out to them, whether it's an email. Oh, Jabaily made me get a Twitter as part of that, because that's a huge way that people advertise graduate positions and other research tech jobs and things like that. But yeah, that's like a first or early second block deal, is like reaching out to those people just to get that started. Yeah.
Yeah, I think something that was really important for me was going to a conference when I was an undergraduate and just seeing talks, and particularly seeing like students of these PIs and seeing what this lab group does and what like the current students are doing as part of their PhDs or master's projects. And that was really inspiring, because I think that gives you a really good slice of like what kind of science, what kind of system, what kind of questions are kind of being investigated in these labs. And that's actually how I first found out about my current advisor, was from a talk at Botany. So yeah, I think it's a great way of getting exposure. Other ways are just reading papers, writing down names, and then looking them up and kind of connecting them to either like their students or previous advisors, and just getting an understanding of like who they worked with and who they're mentoring. And if those students have gone on to successful like postdocs or faculty positions, and just seeing kind of the academic family tree, as they call it, can give you an indication of the type of science and questions that they work on. I was really interested in joining a lab that investigates like certain questions and uses certain techniques. So I was interested in using like population genetics and studying functional traits and restoration ecology. And I was less based in a certain system. And I think that's one way of doing it, of just finding people that are really good at asking these types of questions. And it doesn't really matter what system, or if you're more interested in going from like a system approach and finding someone that like really specializes in a system, that's another way of doing it too.
I agree with what, oh, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Okay. I just say I agree with pretty much everything everyone has said. I think, like Josh, I started really early because I had that year off. I was like working on my senior thesis, and then I had like that whole year, and then the following whole year to kind of just look and see. But I would say, even if you think you know what you want to do, like really pay attention, like going to conferences, reading papers, pay attention to like what makes you like, oh my God, that's so cool. I want to read more of that. Because if you have like an idea, I think it's easy to get sucked in and be like, oh, there's really pretty pictures or like some subject area, like I think that's a cool subject area. Like, do you actually like the papers? Do you want to see the talks? Like, what makes you go like, oh yeah, that's awesome? Pay attention to that. And I think that's a really good way to get going. Follow internet holes of like, I love this paper. Who's the author? Who did they do their PhD with? Who are their grad students? Just like use Google and just go down that hole. And then, like everyone's mentioned, talk to Jabaily, talk to people. There's a lot of bad PIs out there, and people will tell you, their grad students will tell you, it is not a secret. If you are looking at various places, like email people, like you can get that information. Tap into your networks, figure out who's good, who's bad, because there's lots of both.
Yeah, just going off of that, I chose a program partially for one of the advisors. So in my capstone project with Jabaily, I was reading this paper and there's this like one guy and I emailed him and then I had some Zoom calls with him because I was basically like working on what he was. And he was like, you should go work with Niels Kronberg in Sweden. He's like the guy for bryophytes. And I was like, okay. So then I scheduled a call with Niels and then I was like, this guy's so cool. Like all of his work is so cool. And then when I came to Sweden, I like knocked on his office door and I was like, I'm gonna do my thesis with you because here you choose like you do your thesis in your second year. Sort of, it's flexible, but you have to do some classes as well. Um, and he was like, okay. But during the time when I was taking classes, I spoke to his other grad students and I was like, so how is he? And everybody had really great things to say. And every time I met with him, I just felt super invigorated, super excited. So that was also something I chose as well. But I also was looking at all of the other, for a master's, I think it's also important to look at the other professors and see if they're going to be good professors. I will say I had a few professors that did not meet the standards of those at CC. And I wish I'd done a little bit more research because I was pretty disappointed. I was like, CC's lectures were so much better. But then I had some really amazing professors too. And the amazing ones were the ones that I'd actually done research on and chose to apply for them. And the other ones were like a bit disappointing, but that's how it goes. So yeah, for masters, I think it's important to look at who will be your professors as well if you're taking courses.
Great thoughts, everybody. One thing I tell students is like the ecology and evolutionary biology graduate process is very much at some level, you're really looking for the lead professor. Sometimes it can be two who are going to supervise your thesis. You are applying to a program, not to that person directly, but you'll probably want to be communicating with that person or potential people like that early on. Now, friends of yours that might be applying to other types of graduate programs, even in other biological areas, genetics, cell bio, things like that, it may be much more that you are applying to a program, and that kind of interpersonal relationship is maybe something that comes later. You don't have to have it at the time of application. So just understand this is at some level, what we're talking about is very specific to our broad subdiscipline. So as we're talking about, developing these relationships with professors, or we might call them PIs, principal investigators, their graduate students, their former grad students, it's a lot of new interpersonal relationships to investigate. So let's transition now to the actual application. How many schools would you recommend applying to? I mean, this is a different game than applying to undergrad. And what do those applications actually entail? Can you share your experiences on that?
Yeah, so I applied to, well, I started at 5 applications and then I turned in 4, sent those in. And personally, I kind of recommend that 3 to 5 span application thing. This also depends on if you're taking a gap year or applying while in class. If you're, in school, that might just change the game, definitely. But the applications were all pretty similar. They usually had a statement of purpose, so kind of describing why I want, like, what's my purpose? Why do I want to go to grad school? a research statement which was usually a page about my previous research, or as well as sometimes talking about what I wanted to do in grad school. And then it just any additional materials. They had like a section if you wanted to add in science communication or extracurriculars and all that stuff. But one thing I would say is when you're writing these statements of purposes, reach out to Roy Jo Sarton at she's at NTUT Library. She's a tremendous resource for any fellowship or application materials. She's a killer at Fulbright applications, but was recommended to me by another student just to look at application materials and was super beneficial in this huge network of people looking over my application materials.
Seems like there was broad agreement on kind of like 3 to 5 is a reasonable number to consider, and similar kinds of essay prompts for the types of programs. Did anyone see anything wildly different at one particular school?
I would just chime in. So at U of A, like we get to talk to all the prospective students every year. And I agree with 3 to 5. I totally think lower is better. And I think it's not like, I think only apply to places if you think they're good. Like if you're like, oh my God, I don't have enough, let me apply to 10. And like some of those 10 you wouldn't actually go, don't apply. Like don't apply if you're not actually excited to go there. But I will say every year when I talk to the students interviewing for us, people are applying like 10, 12, 15. Like it's crazy. And like I feel like every prospective student I talk to is like more than 10. And just like don't get freaked out if everyone around you is like, I'm applying to 25. Like there's no way they actually want to go to those schools. Like just like, don't get swayed by what other people are saying. Because I think it is really common to apply to a ton, which is a ton of work. It's really expensive. It's like you don't actually know if you want to go there. Just want to say like I think a lot of people do more than
that. Yeah, I agree that less is better.
Go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like less is better. I think I applied to 7 or 8, and I don't even think I think that was way too much especially for a master's. I think there was 3 schools that I actually liked. So I totally agree with everybody there.
And you might have to kind of reset your search criteria from what you thought of as an undergrad, right? If you sort of had internalized US News and World Report rankings or ideas like that, you never would have considered a big state school or a land grant school, right? Wipe your brain clean, I think, as you're starting to think about graduate school. Very different institutions are giving graduate degrees than where you chose to go as an undergrad. There's not a standardized ranking of the quality of these programs that is maintained anywhere. So you're not going to find that out. It is sort of investigation on your own and thinking, like you all were saying, kind of about your own individual criteria.
Go ahead, Josh. A way I feel like to look at if you're super, want to have some ranking or success, like look at the PIs that you're interested in and look at their publication list, look at what publications their grad students are doing. And that can give you a good kind of proxy of how you might fit in and like the success you will have as a grad student there.
Can we talk for just a minute about GREs and GPAs? Did any of you take the GRE for admission? So it's a generational thing, like Leah. Yeah. That was
I took it. I didn't need to.
You didn't?
I didn't need to. Okay. God, I think maybe because I applied to 3 schools. U of A, I think, was optional. I'm trying to remember the other places. I feel like I didn't need to. I don't think anyone needs to now. It's stupid. Wouldn't recommend. It was very expensive. I also had to study for it when I was taking Orgo. That was terrible. Just like, unless you really have to, I would not want.
Yep, I think there's a huge trend in higher ed to move away from the GRE, including the subject tests. You may see that you can submit scores, right? But I would say, and I'd be curious if you all agree, I would not recommend you taking that just to have a score to submit. It is not a trivial thing to put yourself through. GPAs, so you are being admitted to a program, not to a person, right? And so you need to meet kind of the minimum requirements for admission to the graduate school of the university. beyond that, maybe we don't need to stress about GPAs too much. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. If you ask me right now, I don't think I could tell you what my college GPA was. Just because I think what is more important is, as much as this sucks to say, like the name CC means a lot. And so it's like it's bad that it's like a prestige thing, but at least everyone that I know in the US, like all of the professors I've talked to, they know what it means to be a graduate of Colorado College, and that's a big deal. And I think that as like culturally unsure how I feel about that, it is a thing that we get as CC alum, and I think that that means more than your GPA, is assuming you have a certain like baseline, that they will tell you that there's a minimum GPA to apply or to be considered, and it's like, I don't know, I think Wyoming was like a 2.7 or a 3. Like it's not crazy, and so you don't need to. It's more of your research experience, your work experience, your recommendations, things like that, and your written statements for sure.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in and maybe comment on the CC name recognition, just because I feel like in the West, that is 100% the case. There are so many people that know of CC. I think less so in the Midwest, like at least in my program. I'd say most of the PIs are pretty unfamiliar with that school or that name and don't really know a lot of the work or students that have come out of there. So I think it totally depends on where you are in terms of the name recognition. But
I'll agree with that. Being in Europe, nobody knows, or even some people don't even know what Colorado is. I have met people that have recognized Jabaily, though. So if you have connections within your bachelor's world, I think those can mean more. And then European schools, they do look at GPA, but they're also very holistic. I was on like a committee to help with the applications this past year of the incoming students, incoming master's students. And for the American students, they're pretty selective. But if you come from a pretty competitive school and your GPA is like above a 2.5, you're put in like a, oh, this person did pretty well list. Um, and that was like quite surprising to me because I was like, oh my gosh, if I don't have a 4.0, which like I'm gonna never get into grad school, but it's not that important. So
Follow-up question on that for you all. Have you found that the courses on your transcript, especially if you lacked something, did that matter at all at any point?
I will say, I don't know if anyone else in this group has taken comps. So maybe chime in if you have and you had a different experience. But for me, I had some stuff in my transcript from CC, like classes that I'd taken. They knew that, and they expected me to have like very in-depth, very detailed knowledge of those topics, and I did not have it. So that's otherwise, no, I would say it has not come up in my life at all of like what I took, what I didn't. Um, but yeah, my advisor had like looked at my transcript and like knew what I had taken and like refreshed her brain of what I had taken and was like, you took this, you should have known. And I was like, but that was a long time ago. And I don't think about that topic literally ever. So like I haven't refreshed it. So um not to freak anybody out about comps, but like that is one thing that like it might come up. But otherwise it's totally fine.
Yes. So I'm have yet to take we call it our A exam here, but like I didn't take population genetics. I took the lab class MB201 instead. And so for me, it's just like now in my PhD studies, I'm just going to supplement those classes. So, if your advisor, your committee might look at what you've taken, what you haven't, and depending on what your research interests are going, you might take those classes. But that's so far has been my experience with my previous transcript.
Would we say it's kind of accurate that both in the case of master's and in PhD, about half your time-esque, you can be taking classes, Those classes include some of the ones you might see in an undergrad catalog. You may see situations where there's undergrads and grads in the same class. So say you needed biochem or something, you might be taking undergrad biochem as a grad student. It's totally fine. You'll have a committee of people that looks at the transcript with you and helps make a plan for the classes. And then there are also graduate level classes and then seminars not open to undergrads that take up your time. Would you say that's a pretty accurate summation? Before you then move into the second half or more than half, which is focused on your thesis, yes, with no classes or minimal classes.
It's a little different for PhDs in Sweden at least. PhDs are 3 to 4 years in Europe, so they're shorter, and you basically have to have a master's or work experience, multiple years of work experience if you want to apply for a PhD in Europe. I mean, if you have like really exceptional undergrad research experience, I think it's possible. But I would really recommend going for a master's if you're looking into Europe. But you mostly do research and you take like 60 credits of classes, which is equivalent to like 2. And you mostly take really small classes that are maybe like 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah, so it's a little bit different.
That's a really important point that, yeah, you have to do a master's before PhD sometimes. A lot in the case in the US, that is not the case. Would we say that's more common in the US that you can be directly admitted into a PhD? Yeah, and we have a lot of variation here on what the paths various people have chosen. Let's talk a little bit about forming those relationships with people, faculty and students during the application and then the interview process. So we'll start turning towards actually getting an interview. How do you like meet these people, talk to them, get to know them, and how do you identify red flags? We've had some people start to speak to what you want to be looking out for, both in the positive and the negative.
I can talk. I don't know if did any of you guys do in-person interviews for grad school? Okay. You guys all did. I think just in general, like it doesn't have to be terribly stressful. They're probably for the most part not going to quiz you on anything at an interview. And I think it varies by school. At U of A, you're not in for your interview. You've made it to like the next level, but the interview in person will affect your eventual admission decision. And I think other places are different. Like some places you are already in by the time you visit, but if you are not in, be careful. Like, don't be dumb. It's not that hard. Like, I've seen people get really drunk at these things, and like, it's really not like they're not going to quiz you. Just like be normal, be yourself, be curious. Like, just you don't have to like be super reserved or like have anything like super prepped. Honestly, just be able to talk about your research in like a casual, normal way, but don't be dumb, which I feel like should be obvious, but it is not. But yeah. But I would say just ask questions and be as curious as possible is really the best advice.
Yeah, like at least at most of the places I interviewed at they had like a buddy system, which was great. So it was like usually somebody from the lab that you were most interested in that would help kind of bring you to all your interviews so you knew where to go, as well as you got their contact to ask them any questions before as well as after the interview event if you didn't exchange any contacts with anybody else, which was really good at having some into that institution. And I would say, like, I mean, a lot of places do have like happy hours or other kind of mixer events as well as dinners. But if that's not your thing, if you're more of an introvert, there's hopefully with like the buddy system. And I know at like Cornell, we've been trying to make like spaces where you can just like decompress during your interview time. So, and then we have grad students there to also connect with you then like on a much one-to-one, not in a huge networking social type space. So I think that's trying to become more of a thing. And so just really, yeah, I would say just take it easy, ask questions, as Leah said. In my interviews, I think like a couple of them, I talked like 2 seconds because I asked them a question, they asked me about my research, and then they just talked about themselves. So there's a lot of narcissistic people in academia, I must say. But
I think I had a little bit of a different experience. I don't think I ever really had a whole interview sort of deal. Um, I spent countless hours on Zoom meetings for like on Zoom online accepted students weekends. So I was talking to current, past grad students of all of these advisors, other professors in the department, the PI themselves. But when the advisor that I really wanted to work with, which is the one that I'm with now at University of Wyoming, emailed me back after a month and a half, because people in academia are slow to answer emails. He told me to come up to Laramie just to chat with him. I talked to him briefly on Zoom beforehand, and then I drove up to Laramie. It's only 3.5 hours from Colorado Springs. So if anyone's interested in coming to Laramie, it's a great place to spend a block break. Just put that out there. I drove up and chatted with him, and he gave me a tour of the herbarium. I got stuffed onto like a little field trip with my current lab mate. It was a community science thing for the Biodiversity Institute that we have here, and it just happened to be that they were snowshoeing around looking for moose in February, and so I joined with her on that. And by the end of that, like day and a half that I was up here, Dave kind of just said like, you can please finish your application. I'd love to have you in my lab. And that was the point where I knew this was exactly where I wanted to be. Everything about it felt right. None of his students that I had talked to had anything bad to say about him. Everyone had good things to say. Even like Jabaily has said that she had never heard anything bad about him, or other people that I had talked to that said, hey, I'm reaching out with Dave Tank, and they're like, oh, I love that guy, right? So that's super green flags all around. And so after that like brief weekend that I had with him, I kind of pulled my applications from the rest of the places, so I never really went through the rest of them. But yeah, it's so, I can't stress enough how important it is to talk to the current and past grad students of the people you're trying to work with, because they will show you a very different face from what their grad students will actually have experiences with.
One other quick red flag that's like very the same as that is if there's a PI who's like not facilitating interactions with students for you, that's a huge red flag. I know people who do that. Like if you're not getting opportunities to talk to the grad students, be really wary of that.
Let me
and I
ask
just
you.
want to add,
Go ahead.
yeah, just adding to that, like getting to talk to them in person in an area that maybe isn't even on campus or like isn't a part of the official programming is so important. I think that's where I learned a lot about the advisors when they were a little bit more removed from the situation, a little more comfortable. Like it's hard if you're like in the lab or the offices and maybe you are one-on-one with the grad student, but like that's not really the space that they're going to open up to you in. And I also found that over Zoom, it was a bit harder to get into those conversations, especially because you're just like a stranger, and it's, I think, harder to do it through a computer versus like when you have someone sitting in front of you. And like the second thing I'll say about the interview weekends is that it is an incredible opportunity to be able to talk to all of these kind of amazing PIs and researchers, because typically when you go for an interview, you interview with your PI, but then you also get to meet pretty much everyone else in the department. And that experience, I know it's hard to like focus in on that when you're there because it's really stressful and overwhelming, but like looking back, I got to sit in a room for 30 minutes to an hour with like some really incredible scientists, and they were solely focused on me and what I've done in the past and my interests. And I got to ask them questions, and that is like a really rare opportunity. So try to have a sliver of that going into it of like, wow, I'm so like appreciative of this opportunity, and you know, a willingness to learn from other people, and just be engaged in that conversation because it's a really cool thing to be able to do.
Awesome. Can I ask a quick question, follow up? What would you all think about applying to work with a brand new PI who has no track record with graduate students?
So I don't have direct experience with this, but my partner did that and he had a horrible time. He is also a master's student here in Sweden, and I don't think it's the case for every PI that has this like this, but I would be more wary. And this is how I kind of advise the younger master's students as well, is to be a bit like wary of that because she just didn't have experience on how to manage her time the way a PI should. She didn't really have the experience of um, helping make connections. And the difference between my master's thesis and my partner's master's thesis were exponentially different. Um, he's like burnt out of science, and I'm invigorated in it. And I think it's heavily due to the supervisor. So I think you should just, it's not necessarily a no, but maybe be wary, at least from masters. I don't know if other people agree.
I didn't do that, but my department has a couple. We have two new professors and a third starting this fall. So I've kind of seen people go through it a little bit. I agree with Eliza. It's definitely not like a hard no, but there are ways. Like we have a woman in our department who's pretty new and she has her first PhD student. I would say honestly even be more wary for a PhD because it's a lot longer than a master's, and like things like the longer you're in it, the worse it can get. But people who are just starting have been postdocs, they've been grad students, they've mentored undergrads, they've mentored grad students when they were postdoc. Like I don't know anyone who's getting these faculty jobs without going through a postdoc. So like they have had previous jobs where they have mentored people, and not to the like large scale of a whole PhD, but they have mentored people. And I know that one of the grad students who applied to one of our new faculty members, she had reached out to some of the people that this woman had mentored when she was a postdoc. And all of that information is available online. Like look at their CVs, look at their previous lab's website, but like they should have still mentored people in other formats. And those people will have similar, like, they're not going to have like as extensive of experience, but they'll be able to tell you at least something. Because if someone is horrible when they're a postdoc mentoring a grad student, they're going to be horrible as an advisor, and vice versa. If they're really helpful as a postdoc, like I have a postdoc in my lab who's so fabulous. She helps me all the time. And if she became a PI, I would be like, yes, you should work with her. She's the best. So you should still, you might have to dig more, but you should still be able to figure out people who worked with them and been mentored by them.
Okay, let's transition now to talking about finances. Graduate school does include tuition, surprise, surprise, stipends, fellowships, and you'll have living expenses. How does your institution help make it possible for you to go to grad school, and how did you figure out this information?
They should. So I we this was usually talked about during the either interview, like the visits, so the recruitment or like the visit after you've been accepted. They kind of lay it down the line of like you should always ask if they don't tell you what's the TA situation for teaching, or you like how are you going to be funded by teaching, by research, by internal fellowships. So that's one thing that I was able to get mostly from recruitment, and now let other people share their insights.
I agree. You should be getting it from recruitment. It also, hopefully, most places should be on their website. The stipends. It depends on the school. For us, you're guaranteed TA ships for 5 years, and a lot of people are able to get them beyond that. That might be changing in the future, but you're guaranteed 5 years for sure of TAing. One thing I would highly recommend, and I remember when Emma was applying to grad school, I literally wrote out my budget for her to show her. But because like I can look at my thing and I can see it says $12,500 per semester, and like, what does that mean? Is that livable? I don't know. I'd never lived in Tucson before. Ask the grad students if it's livable. Ask what kind of housing they have. Do they have roommates? Do they not have roommates? Are they really stressed but don't have roommates? Um, like try to suss it out, see what it's like. That's one thing I really love about Tucson personally is I was really attached to being in the West, but Tucson is pretty affordable. and it's a really cool city, which has been one thing that's been really awesome. But yeah, look for the numbers, but talk to the grad students also, because the numbers can vary from place to place, like what's livable. Also ask about student fees. Um, there's a general movement to like not have students cover them, but I think that hasn't gotten everywhere yet. Like this fall is my first fall ever of not having to pay my fees, which is so exciting. But that's probably over $1,000 a year in most places. For me, it was $600 a semester that I had to pony up and do at every semester. So ask if you have to cover those. Ask if your department covers them. But yeah, I would say like look for numbers and also talk to people.
I would say also ask if your grad students are unionized. That can make a really big difference. And it's happening at a lot of institutions across the country. Like we recently went through unionization this year, and it totally changed the game for like a lot of our students. We now get free vision, dental, health insurance was already covered, but now it's covered even to a higher degree. Like I think our deductible is even lower. And they increased our stipend by a really significant amount. And there's like a plan for future improvements and coverages for like family, like daycare and things like that. So that can make a really big impact on your experience as a grad student. And if there's current efforts to unionize your program, that would be good to know just to like understand the scope of that. But it definitely has really improved things for our grad students.
Also, though, if you don't live in a deep blue state, that doesn't work. So keep track of that. Arizona is not a union friendly state, and our grad student union has like no powers. So just if that's important to you, keep that in the back of
Yeah, I concur with that. I live in Wyoming, so you can take with that what you will. But I have found that grad students are really, really willing to talk about it more than in the past. Yeah, we're very even like current grad students, we're very open with each other, and that's how you find out about some suspicious things that are happening in certain labs. Everyone gets it's very odd. Everyone at our school gets paid slightly differently based on there's a base salary for TAs, but if you're on a grant or you're a research assistant, like my advisor recently moved to University of Wyoming and he took one of his grad students with him and he didn't want her to take a pay cut. So yeah. So in order for her not to take a pay cut, he is using part of his startup funds to supplement our salaries so that one, she didn't take a pay cut, and two, she's not getting paid more than the rest of us, which is very kind of him. But I know most advisors might not do that. Yeah, we are definitely not unionized. They are very against that, our institution, but they did just approve a 22% salary increase for grad students this semester. So we're getting taken care of as best we can, even without a union.
Would we say it's accurate that, at least in the US, and I'd be curious about Eliza's experience, that you would want to look for a program where your tuition is going to be waived and you have some sort of stipend guaranteed for a reasonable number of years, whether you earn that through teaching, through doing research, or you're on a fellowship just for yourself? Which should provide you with a reasonable ability to focus on your studies without having to seek a lot of employment elsewhere. Cool. What's it like?
Also, summer.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, summer.
But also summer pay, variable between departments, variable between advisors, universities. And like what Caroline was saying, in my department, it is advisor dependent. So you should absolutely ask if you get paid in the summers. And that can be very variable between, like in my department, we have, I mean, everyone like understands it's really hard, but like some of us get paid and some people don't. And it's definitely it's not, it doesn't like, it's not a huge deal, but like it is like the people who don't get paid are really a lot more stressed than the people who don't, which is hard. And it's really variable exactly what Caroline's advisor is trying to avoid. It's really bad. But it's summer funding is often not guaranteed in that TA package. Sometimes you have to TA again in the summer. My advisor pays us from her grants in the summer, so we get full time to work on research, like 100% of the time to work on research, which is so awesome. But she pays us that from her grants, and she chooses to do that. So definitely ask about summer funding also.
So in Sweden, for masters, you pay tuition. There are scholarships available, both US and at least my university offered me a scholarship that covered tuition. I applied for a few small funds to cover living expenses. For the 2 years, you're required to have $20,000 in your bank account to get a residence permit. So that's 2 years of living. I had a loan and a graduate student loan and a stipend that covered those two things. So I don't have to pay back like over half of it. And then I got a lot of work as a master's student working for the department, TAing, doing random field stuff. You get paid really well in Sweden, also for a PhD. It pays, I think it's ranked the best pay in the world for PhDs. You get 6 weeks of paid leave. You get like I think it's about 500-ish US dollars a month, or every no 500 US dollars every 3 months to put towards personal health, like gym memberships, massages, things like that. It's a high life here, guys. Like everybody takes summer off or takes like 3 weeks to go back. I know a PhD student from the US who literally went for like 6 weeks, Thanksgiving and Christmas. Yeah, so these are all things that like Sweden itself requires the employees to provide. So Sweden is really big on the unions. Everything is unionized here. So you get paid really well if you're going to do a PhD in Sweden. Um, and for a master's, you don't get paid, but there are ways to make it relatively affordable. I didn't have like a way to pay for it without these stipends and these offers. So I did end up paying in a sense for the master's, but again, I was paying for an experience and my loans were relatively small for that. So yeah.
Awesome. So just a couple final questions here. How do you balance it all in grad school? What's it like, and how do you kind of foster health and joy?
I can continue on that just on like the Swedish propaganda front. In Sweden, you're really expected to be a student first. So if you work, they treat you really well. This is you have minimal homework. You are like expected to work 40 hours a week and no more, like very little more. So you do work more sometimes, obviously. In my thesis, I was working like way too much. But they do really try to prevent you from burnout. I think the work-life balance is way better than in the US. There's a lot of fun activities to do. There's a lot of fun stuff going on with like the department, like Friday soccer, Friday beers. Yeah, it's fun. And it's really cool living in a different country and experiencing different things and like meeting people from all around the world. And yeah, I've had a great time. I liked grad school way better than I liked my undergrad. I just have to say that. Like I loved CC in some ways, but I had a hard time in a lot of ways. And I think I actually found myself in grad school way more. I found more people that I'm more similar to. It's okay if your bachelor's isn't the time of your life. It's okay if it's hard. Um, I don't regret it, but I think grad school is more my speed. So yeah.
I'd definitely say because of the block plan, yeah, grad school will definitely feel different just not being on the block plan. In terms of the people that I know that are happy, like later on PhD students, they seem to have some type of hobby that they care about, or something that they have that's like a schedule that is self-care to them. Like I know this one research associate in my lab who during his PhD started getting a massage every single month. And he's continued that. It's like try to have something that brings you joy and continuously you can check in and have that, you know, allow you to get outside of your work. And like people, yeah, work-life balance is hard. Imposter syndrome, you'll feel it even more than maybe you do in undergrad. But talking about it and knowing that everyone feels some sense of not belonging where they are is maybe one of the first steps to kind of knowing that you know you belong obviously where you're at, and you know just trust the process, to put it in simpler terms.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything Josh and Eliza have said. I feel very lucky in that my lab mates are amazing and they're some of my best friends in town. So I spend a lot of time with them outside of work, but doing non-work things. So my lab mate and her partner and I have a little deal going on where I buy cable and they feed me like 3 or 4 nights a week, which is great for me because Eliza, my old roommate, would know that I don't like to cook and I'm very lazy. So we spend a lot of evenings together watching hockey on the couch and eating dinner. Our lab goes out for lab beers almost every Friday, and sometimes Dave, our advisor, will join us and buy beer for us, which is even better. But yeah, I play hockey in town with a lot of elderly people, and I spend a lot of time watching movies and knitting on the couch with my lab mates, which are super fun. Yeah. The one thing I would say about the block plan is that it is super weird relearning how to take multiple classes at a time. But the one thing that it has prepared me for is that I can put out a very high quality of work in a very short period of time. So if you break down your multiple classes at once into just very small pieces, it's the same thing. And so I can write a massive grant in a couple weeks, and it's not that crazy, though it does really stress my advisor.
Also in Sweden, we basically have the block plan. You take classes for 6 weeks, which 6 weeks feels like so long. Like I was thriving because I was like, wow, this is so much time to learn things. You take one class at a time for 6 weeks, 9 to 5. So yeah.
I would
Yeah, I'll
just
say, oh, you can go, Leah.
no go because you have to hop off, don't you?
Okay. Yeah, thanks. I would say in the work-life balance front, make sure, I mean, it's hard to do early on, but find the line for you that's like, I'm not going to work on Sundays or Saturdays, or like, I'm going to reserve this day for me, or I'm not going to work past this time, because sometimes it's easier to have that hard line that you can just be like, oh, it's Saturday, like, I'm not working today, versus like, oh, maybe I should. I feel like I need to get ready for this experiment or grant or whatever. It's so easy just to like let it bleed into your entire life. So for me, it's really helpful just to set a boundary and try to stick to that boundary as much as possible. And I also like try to have separation in terms of like where I work. because I do a lot of my actual work like in the lab, in the office, where I have a space dedicated to that. And then I try not to bring it home as much. And yeah, I try to like have a really clear separation there, which definitely helps my mental health. But yeah, I think people do it differently, and COVID definitely changed the work from home lifestyle. So, yeah.
I agree with what Emma said exactly. My first year of grad school was completely remote. I was still living in Aspen, which I think actually really, really, really helped me set very strict boundaries from the beginning because all my friends were skiing and like research is cool. Going skiing with friends always going to be better. And none of my friends were in grad school. And so it was like, I have to get this work done because I have to go ski with them. And that was like a really extreme, obviously, like COVID, we couldn't hang out inside. Like there was a lot of like specific circumstances happening there, but I think it helped me draw boundaries, like Emma was saying, really early on. Because it is really easy to just like let things, like, oh, I didn't finish it on Friday. I guess I'll do it on Sunday. Like there's so much of that. Set the boundaries early on, absolutely have hobbies like everybody else said. I think the other thing that really helps a lot is having an advisor who also has hobbies. That was a question that I asked advisors when I interviewed is what do you do for fun and what do your grad students do for fun? And that was a really good like judging thing. Like if people didn't have answers, I was like, well, then you're not gonna like when I want to go mountain biking on Saturday. And I'm not gonna reply to your emails. So it's a fun question. And if people have fun answers, you've got a great conversation. And if they don't have a good answer, you probably don't want to work with them. Um, but yeah, set boundaries and when I talk to my advisor, she's like, what'd you do this weekend? And I'll tell her, and they're like, what'd you do this weekend? So definitely try to find people who are gonna do that and support you. And like even my advisor, like she's so overwhelmed. She does a bazillion things all the time, and she'll acknowledge that she will like do things more into like off work hours, but like she doesn't expect us to do that with her. So yeah, that really helps to be like, our whole lab culture is really good. Like everybody does stuff on the weekends. And she knows that, like our advisor knows that and supports it. So I think not having to like push against an advisor will also help you not feel guilty when you're like having the weekend to not work.
I love hearing how you all have found people and places where you're happy and you're spending, good chunks of your life there, right? So you deserve to be happy and to live a full life and to continue to embrace, the liberal arts and a well-rounded life. So I love hearing all that advice. So final question, what advice would you give a current undergrad in organismal biology and ecology who wants to be successful at going to grad school, to be you someday? What advice would you give them?
I can keep going. I think one of the things I miss so much about CC, and I don't know if this is my department specific or just like the product of a PhD at an R1, I miss the liberal arts and the interdisciplinary stuff so much. Like we had a talk a couple months ago about like how like components of your identity affects your success as a faculty member, and I was like, oh, I really like listening to people talk about social science research, and I really miss that. So I would say at CC, like, don't get too specific too fast, because if you want to go to grad school, there's infinite time to get infinitely specific. And don't CC has so many incredible interdisciplinary things, and people really emphasize that and value that, and like take advantage of all the variety of things that you could do, and like take the Soc class, take the FemGen class. Like, you think you're a plant person, take entomology. Like, don't get too specific too fast is my number one piece of advice. And think about writing. As coming out of CC, you will be a better writer than almost everybody you know, and focus on that and develop that, because that will help you get grants a lot.
My advice kind of goes back to what I said before. It's okay if it hurts. Like, it's okay if it kind of sucks a lot, because like looking back, I wasn't really happy those 4 years. I wasn't really myself, and like it's okay. Like, I think a lot at CC, at least in my experience, everyone like seemed to fit in so well and I didn't. And like it's okay if it's just school for you. Soak that up. Like, echoing everything Leah said, like take all the classes you can. Try to expand your horizons, but it doesn't have to be your whole identity. Um, there's a really big world out there, and it's okay if it's okay if you're not like the best at everything. Like, I was not. Like, I'm doing really well now in grad school, but I didn't have research experience in my bachelor's. I wasn't the best at any of my classes. I honestly had such bad imposter syndrome. I remember telling Jabaily, like, I'm a loser. Like, I'm never gonna make it. And like, it's so funny to me now, because it's like I wish I could give that little self a hug, because like she was doing her best, but like just don't compare yourself too much, and just try to enjoy it, and remember it's only 4 years, for good or for bad.
Yeah, my one thing I would say is don't ever stop like being curious, and really try to think about being able to like ask questions. If you're able to ask questions, you'll be able to thrive in grad school, because if you have a strong question, then you'll be able to dive into that. So stay inquisitive.
I would say get comfortable with kind of failing at things and maybe having to restart or reframe or rethink something. At CC, I think we're all like very successful people and dedicated, and we tend to do very well in our classes, or, excel in other areas of life. And it doesn't have to be the case for everyone, as Eliza said, but like I think when you get to grad school, like the most successful people that I see are the most resilient, the people that can keep going if something doesn't work out, or if they have to change directions, or if something happens to their project, or unforeseen circumstances. Like, you just got to keep going, be persistent, stay curious, like Josh said. But yeah, don't give up. You can do it.
And that's totally what I meant too. Like, that was perfect. Like, the resilience. Like, it's okay if it sucks, you'll get through it. CC teaches you a lot.
Yeah, I think everything that everyone else has said. Josh definitely took mine. Being able to ask the questions. Don't be afraid to ask the questions that you want to ask. You deserve to take up the space to ask those questions. And it's okay to take some time for yourself too. You don't have to always be working. It's just because it looks like other people are always working, it doesn't mean that you're not working just as hard or just as well as they are. Yeah, imposter syndrome is something that I struggled with a lot in college, and it's still something that I think everybody on here is fighting. But yeah, I think it's helpful to know that everybody is dealing with it, and it's something that yeah, if you have a good support system around you, that you can help each other out and bring each other out of it. Which I feel really lucky I had that at CC. And I'm even luckier to have that in grad school too.
Well, I want to sincerely thank each and every one of you. I am so proud of you. And it's really cool to see you reflect on all of this. And I know it'll be really impactful for our OBE community here. And as we continue to build and grow a great alumni network, remember that's one of the great benefits of going to CC, right? Is a great network of alumni who get it and get you and can help give you great advice just like this on moving forward. So I'm so proud of every one of you, and I want to sincerely thank you for your time.